course, your is out everybody. That's going to die. Did it? Okay.
Hi everyone, we're going to get started, so if you can make your way to your seats, that would be great.
I'm with the old man. Good. It's a promise.
All right, hello everyone, welcome. Happy New Year. Thank you for being here. I know it's very cold outside, so it's nice to have you all in here. I will just let you know, if you haven't grabbed a lunch yet, we have plenty outside, so if you want to get up and grab a lunch for a $5 donation, please do so. My name is Leah Zickmund. I want to welcome you to today's First Friday Forum, and thank our commissioners who have joined us today, Ray D'Agostino and Alice Yoder. We've been hosting this event through the Hourglass since 2010, and so we're really pleased to be able to continue hosting this event with the community and have you all here to ask questions. Those of you who attended our last forum in December got to learn a little bit about me, but I'm still learning about our community, who you are, who everyone is here, and so I was hoping to just share a brief story with you all before we dive into our program today. As I've been learning about the work of the Hourglass and connecting with our organization's unique history and love for Lancaster, I have returned more than once to a 2018 article written by Thomas Friedman of the New York Times about Lancaster. In it, Friedman talks about being invited to Lancaster to give a paid talk for one of his books. When he learned more about Lancaster, he decided to come back on his own time and investigate how the civic leadership of the people here created such a unique dynamic for our county. If you want to be an optimist about America, stand on your head, he says.
Okay.
Friedman goes on to talk about the unique characteristics of the Lancaster community and the way relationship building and civil leadership and engagement fuel the success of where we live. I'm inspired by his words and thought they would be a wonderful reminder as we start our discussion today. I hope we continue to recognize the privilege it is to sit with one another, ask questions, and work together. I hope you all will enjoy the opportunity to learn from our commissioners, ask them questions, and remember that only through mutual respect towards one another can we continue to thrive as a community. Today's forum will kick off with a few questions that were developed by the Hourglass to get the conversation started. If you're joining us virtually via the live stream, please drop any questions you have into the chat and we'll do our best to monitor them. I'd like to, before we start our questions, thank our First Friday Forum sponsors, Rogers & Associates, for making these forums possible, Millersville University and the Ware Center for hosting us today, and Shoemaker for providing our live stream services. We'll start today with a few questions from the Hourglass and spend about 30 minutes having our commissioners respond to those questions. The second half today will be for your questions. So hopefully as we're moving through the first part of our program, you have thoughts in mind that you'd like to ask them as well. Ready?
Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. Are your microphones working properly? You should have checked that.
Hello?
Great.
Hello?
Perfect.
It's working.
Okay. My first question is for you, Alice. At last year's Commissioners Forum, I understand you were joining us during your first week on the job. Can you talk about some of your areas of focus and accomplishments since then?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. And thank you so much for everyone for being here. And thank you to the Hourglass for hosting, again, the Commissioners Forum this time. So, yeah, this was the first Friday for me in office. So it's the first Friday of the month, and it was the first Friday for me in office. And I think I made one of my first mistakes as commissioner, and I scheduled a meeting right before this meeting. So I don't know, for those of you that were here last year, I came like sliding into home plate, taking my coat off, sitting down and answering the question about what I wanted to do the first year. So I made sure I didn't make that mistake a second time. So I got here a little earlier, which is great. And my hair was brown then, so you can see how the first year went. Really a clue. Yeah, so really excited for the privilege. Thank you so much for me to be able to vote for me if you did or didn't, and supported me in some way to be your county commissioner. I'm excited to be in this role. And those of you that don't know a lot about my background, the short version is that from the work that I've done for like 35 years in healthcare, I worked a lot with county government and the various agencies. I was on a lot of the advisory boards and or committees, so I had a pretty good understanding of how county government worked, but certainly not the inner works of county government. So within my first year, I spent a good amount of time early on in the first few months getting to understand the inner works of county government, how to navigate systems and get things done, and certainly get to know the employees within county government and how wonderful they really are in terms of true public servants. So I spent a good amount of time doing that. But as I mentioned a year ago, I think there's a test, so how many can list the things I said were a priority. I felt like I did have an opportunity to go deeper and do a dive to be able to start working on some of the things I feel are still important. So the first one that I'd like to give you an update on was specifically around the issue of homelessness and housing as being a priority. I mentioned last year, and there's no different now, that when we go around the county, certainly the affordable housing is an issue, whether it's the northern part, the rural ends, and I know the Hourglass has had multiple forums related to housing. So that was an issue. But particularly around the issue related to homelessness as well. So I have assigned as a liaison to the Redevelopment Authority, so started getting to know the folks there and the work that they're doing, and a deeper dive as it relates to homelessness and the work that's been done. So what I learned early on was, and when I look around this room, I know a lot of you that are involved in the work, if not now, you had been for many years, related to addressing either affordable housing and or homelessness. So there's a lot of really good work that has been done in our county for, I would say, decades to address the issue related to homelessness. But that now covered with the issue of not only affordable housing, but housing for people of all income levels. And certainly if you have that tight market around the lower cost housing, then when you have people that are in homelessness and we're looking to get them stabilized and into housing, then of course that's a big bubble that needs to be burst in order to make a difference, and how you could see the linkage, between housing and homelessness. So the one thing that I was able to do successfully working with the Redevelopment Authority is what I clearly heard from people in the community is there's a lot of really good work. We spend a lot of time addressing the immediate issue related to homelessness and the crisis side to all of it. But it's a good time in our community to take a step back and conduct a strategic plan that looks at the issue of homelessness. And as most of you know, I'm a nurse by background and coming from healthcare and public health. Homelessness, both the issue of homelessness and affordable housing, is a public health issue. So how do we take a step back, look at it through the lens of being a public health issue? So using the model where we look at primary prevention as well as crisis and then also stabilization. So again, I'm really played a listening mode for many months in this because I know there's so many more people that are experts in this area around our community to hear what they thought they needed to have done next to address the issue. Also made the rounds with many municipalities, particularly the rural areas, to find out what they were thinking about related to affordable housing as well as homelessness. And it's a county issue for sure. And I rarely found somebody that disagreed with that. So we were able to find funding with working with the Redevelopment Authority to pay for a consultant to help us with a strategic plan from a county standpoint. So we obtained the funding. We put out an RFP. It should be closing 2 or 3 days ago. And from what I understand, we did get a lot of people that were interested in helping us with that. And then we plan to implement the start of developing the plan in February. So we're hoping to hit the ground running and get moving with a strategic plan from a community standpoint. A couple of things that would be good for you to know related to that. It's going to be very community focused. My bent on this is that we don't need another expert to be the consultant because we have lots of experts in our community that know what we've done, what we need to do, and that I think will challenge each other to be creative and innovative to find a different solution than what we had before, so that we're able to address this very important issue. But that will be a consultant that will help convene the community. And again, the Hourglass and others have done some really great work to get a better frame of the issue. So the consultant will help bring that all together. So for all of you, stay tuned, because there'll be lots of opportunities to be part of other forums to provide input to develop the plan. The plan will be both strategic with a vision to be for 3 to 5, probably looking at a 5-year plan, and then it will also have actionable pieces to it. So it won't be just sort of this theoretical piece that's put on a shelf. It'll be very much in the first year, this is what we think we need to do, in the second year, and so on. And then also start listing who's going to do it, who's going to do the work. I think what a lot of people do know is that there's a lot of really good ideas about what we need to do around this issue, but we're short on resources, both enough people to be able to tackle it and also financial resources. So how are we going to identify what those issues are, be clear on what the problem is and what those solutions are, and then what are the possible resources where we can get them to help fill those gaps to make things happen over that period of time. And just be upfront about it, to know that if we're going to really attack this issue, which I feel really confident that Lancaster County can do it, because I've been part of a lot of collaboratives, and the issue is certainly really large in front of us, but compared to some other communities, it's not nearly as big, and I think that we have a real creative, collaborative community, and I think the municipalities are really open to thinking about zoning, which, as most of you know, when we start thinking about north, south, east, west, how do we address this issue, that there'll be good conversations around that. The one thing I also want to mention, too, related to the plan, so we're going to hopefully start launching the process in February, and we're hoping to have it completed by September to be able to start implementation in January of 2026. So stay tuned for that. The second, can I go into more? Am I good? Okay. So the second, so that's related to housing and homelessness. And the one piece to that, when I started talking about affordable housing and municipalities and all, I know Commissioner D'Agostino is the liaison to the planning department, so I'm assuming that he'll be talking more about the planning department, but a lot of the work and direction that's in Places 2040 and the implementation of that also mentions about simplifying zoning and some other ordinances that will really overlap. So we're really in line nicely with addressing the housing and homelessness issue within our community, done a great job on crisis, but we need to be more strategic about it. The second thing I wanted to mention is I have spent a good amount of time focused on the new correctional facility. And I think, as most of you, if you have been tracking it, that we approved the most recent, the final schematic plan so far in August of 24. And just this past week, we authorized to move forward with a consultant, like just developing the next phase of the plan that we're working on coming through. And hopefully that could be done within the next 8 to 12 months. I'm hoping sooner than later, because I feel like we have a really good plan. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback and able to move forward with it. But in the meantime, particularly related to the work that I've been focused on is, as I mentioned, one of the reasons I ran is because I do think that that there's a model from a correctional facility to focus on rehabilitation and not as much on the punishment side to it. Certainly with some heinous crimes, that's needs to be a focus, but we have an opportunity of a lifetime as we build this new facility to really build it so that we do what we need to do around rehabilitating inmates as best we can. It's not, to me, I believe it's the right thing to do from a personal perspective, but it's also financially the good thing to do, because it's really expensive to have the time that's spent for someone in the prison. But I also think from a safety standpoint, so you can look at it from the right thing to do morally, you can look at it from a financial perspective, but you can also look at justifying a lot of programming and services focused on rehabilitation from a safety standpoint. Is our community safer if we have people go into the prison and we do nothing to help them and just have them released back into the community? So many reasons why I felt passionate about it and so excited to have the opportunity to influence that in some way. And so if you looked at the schematic that has been moving forward, it does allow for a good space to be able to do a lot of that programming. So I've been working with the staff at the prison to identify and look at what we've been doing so far, and what's the wish list for how we move forward and how do we take more things to scale. The particular thing that I've been focused on, particularly at the prison, is around data. So I know for some people that might be a little boring area, but what I found is that in several parts of county government, we collect a lot of information don't necessarily put it together into a story where we tell the public how things are going, really tell the good stories about what's happening that's going well, and then use it as a process improvement tool when we look at data to start thinking about what are some things we need to maybe do differently and how do we fill in the gaps. So before my time, the ARPA fund was committed to a new IT system for the prison. So they just actually implemented that in August. So some of the data that's been collected, we'll be able to extract that for those of you that have done things with data. It's like information's good only if you have it and it's usable and tells a story, and you can put two different data elements together to be able to think about moving forward. So I've been focused on currently the data that's available at the prison to be able to say who's in the prison now, how can we tell their story, how can we look at their trajectory, and then how do we lay those programs that are currently at the prison, at the jail, and how are they currently helping individuals, and then where are some of the gaps that we need to fill, particularly not wait till the new, because we have still a couple of years out from having the new prison operational. So how do we think about what we can do now to make that happen? And that is really through data analytics, and then developing things as simple as a PowerPoint where you can just take it around anywhere to tell the story about this is where we are from a prison and an inmate standpoint. Particularly, how do we focus on preventing recidivism, being one of the ultimate goals. You want to improve the lives of those when they're released from prison for the families and the individuals, but we also want to reduce recidivism as well. So focused on data, although it seems simple for those of you that have worked a lot with data, it's really not. The system's so important. The staff is working so hard day to day doing their job to make sure that they input the information that we can extract and have the time to be able to do that is also important. So it's usually a little bit more complicated than people have done in most. And also learned, and I knew this coming into it, but the amount of mental health issues and substance use disorder issues is pretty phenomenal of people that are inmates in our jail. And so how do we increase those services for those individuals related to that, which focuses on another area of focus that I've had is I've been doing a deeper dive around the reentry process. So how does somebody re-enter into our community, all the wonderful community partners that are standing ready to help make that strong connection and warm handoff from what happens in the jail to what happens outside the jail when they're released, to make that really tight to the point where, many of our community partners are also working in the jail. And then we have that transition. So the whole, some people know it as one fluid reentry where it's almost seamless that we make that happen. And then again, be accountable to the idea of recidivism. So the programs and services that we provide currently, if we need to increase those, and are they making a difference, and how do we measure that to be able to tell the story? So that's around the data. And another piece to that is a workforce. So those of you, I know several of you here are employers of small and some large companies. So to really look at one thing that people being released from jail need is employment. So some of them have employment. We want to make sure they keep that as much as possible when they're in the jail. Last thing we want them to lose is the employment. Second thing, you lose employment for a long period of time. You're not able to pay your rent. You're not able to afford your mortgage anymore. So then the whole issue of being homeless. So we see that at many aspects of the county government, which was one thing I kind of knew. But now that I'm in the role and I'm a liaison to Behavioral Health, Developmental Disability Department, Children and Youth Department, Office of Aging, all of them are touched by the issue of homelessness and affordable housing. So kind of go into my first priority, and then linked into the prison. When people are released from prison, the main thing they need is a job, and they need a roof over their head to stay stable to prevent them from recidivizing. So it's all really connected. The second thing is also...
Excuse me, Alice, I'm so sorry. We can come back to some of these, but I just want to give Ray an opportunity to also kind of address the first question, and then we can come back.
So I'll just mention, I won't talk about them. I think they're important enough for me to mention in terms of my priorities and what I've been working on, is youth behavioral health, which is also linked to the Youth Intervention Center. So those two I've spent a good amount of time. You can see that they're really closely linked to the first two. And then the last one is I'm still very interested in Lancaster County having a public health department, and there are some steps that I've taken to start looking at what, if it's not a official health department, what are some steps that we can take to that and work on that journey. So I can fill you in more on that later.
Thanks so much, Alice. I want to turn my next question over to you, Ray, and this can be kind of a combination of the first question as our veteran commissioner at the table. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your proudest accomplishments from 2024 and then focus for 2025.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. And first of all, thank you for having us. I always appreciate being out in the community so that, you can hear unfiltered, quite frankly, some of the things that are going on and be able to ask us questions. So happy New Year to you all. Appreciate the opportunity again. So I have several things, but I'm just going to touch on some of them more than others. The first thing when we're talking about the past year, for me, as being the chairman of the Board of Elections and liaison to the Elections Department, I think number one, quite frankly, has to be the election of 2024. For those of you who don't know, behind the scenes, there's a lot of work that goes on. And the 2024 general election, quite frankly, started for us at the end of 2023, the very beginning of 2024. We pulled people together. Of course, Krista Miller and the election staff are phenomenal. They're just terrific, and we give them all the praise for all the hard work and the great work they do. But in order to to pull off an election like we had in 2024, and I won't need to tell you what we're facing. We all knew that it was going to be a record turnout. We knew it was going to be a major election in our history. So my job as a commissioner and as chairman of the Board of Elections is to pull folks together, not just the election department, but other departments, other agencies within and what's outside of county government to really begin to plan along with elections department to pull off the 2024 election. And we worked, month after month, week after week on planning. And there were some things that came before the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Elections to be approved. But a lot of it's just implementation. It's just planning and thinking about, the past, what we've done, what worked, what needs to be tweaked, and implementing that to the point where we actually had a tabletop exercise before the election. And it's not just the operational component, but security and also the integrity. I've often said, and I will continue to repeat, that when the mantra for us in terms of carrying out an election is that it needs to have integrity, veracity, and transparency in everything that we do. And when we talk about this, even internally, we match it up whenever we're doing to those three ideals. And so I think by all accounts, 2024 election went extremely well in this community. And so hats off to everyone who is a part of that. Alice mentioned some of these things. We'll talk about the correctional facility because there's a question about that. But that's certainly another highlight of where we have come so far and where 2024 we ended and where we're heading in 2025. Modernizing our IT. One of the things that we set as a priority for county government with the ARPA funding was to modernize our IT. Whether it was existing IT or taking literally, maybe it wasn't typewriters, the old-fashioned typewriters, but maybe pen and paper, and maybe it was Excel sheets, and doing things by hand, to, yes, upgrading some of our existing IT infrastructure. But we really put a focus on that in 2024 and have really done some really good things, including data, making sure that we're collecting data, and not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, but knowing what we really want to collect and how we're going to use it. And the chief among the things that we have accomplished is a new enterprise software system. It's called Workday. I know some of you probably were. I know Alice did in her prior job. But we went from basically a homegrown system to a modern system, and we just literally flipped the switch within the last week or so. So it's live, and I think it's really going to drive efficiency and effectiveness in ways that, yes, in some ways we thought it would, but quite frankly, until you actually use it and do it, it will modernize and create efficiency and effectiveness in ways we haven't even thought of yet. even the process of looking at operationalizing this new system, our staff has already started to think about it because of the questions and the issues that have come up about business practices and, doing things differently that will be more efficient and effective. So I'm really excited about that. So that also translates into what we're going to be doing in 2025 that I'm excited about. We pulled off the merger to create the public safety department, a merger of 3 different parts of public safety. Years ago, it had been one department, then it was split up. Best practice has shown other counties, not only across Pennsylvania, but across the country, have a unified public safety department that looks at not just emergency management, but also, communications within emergency management and IT infrastructure as well. So I'm really excited about that occurred. We can already see some of the benefits that we've already seen, but there's more benefits going to come, and not just for county government in the sake of how we do things, but also the community. You're going to see a lot more information reports that will filter down to the municipal level, that will filter also down to the general public as well, not just in emergency preparedness. The volunteer emergency services real estate tax credit was implemented in 2024. We're really happy about that. We're one of the few counties that has adopted this. I'm assuming you know this, but emergency services such as fire, police, and ambulance are not the province of county government. It's a province of municipalities. But back in 2020, the state legislature did update the emergency volunteer emergency services tax credit program to include counties to offer a real estate tax rate. It's the only tax that we have that we could affect with such a tax credit. And we did implement that. We started out at $150, so any of the volunteers can apply for that. The reason we did this is because we all know that we need to make sure that our volunteers are not only appreciated, but we have retention and recruitment opportunities. So we thought it was good to partner with our municipal officials who can also do this as well. They can offer not only a real estate tax credit, but an income tax credit because they have earned income tax. So that just opened up for the second year. It's available on our website. I did post about that on Facebook. I mentioned about ARPA. ARPA is technically finished in terms of authorizing or allocating it under the Treasury guidelines. We had to do all the authorization for the money we received from the federal government by the end of 2024, literally a couple of days ago. We have finished that. We're done. But implementation can continue on till the end of 2026. So I'm really happy how we finished off. I could tell you that, for instance, I did a quick crunch of numbers. It's about $29 million of ARPA funds that went directly into the community. A lot of that was for community infrastructure, water, sewer, stormwater, public safety, I'll include in that, conservation efforts to conserve some of our natural resources. And we partnered, obviously, in doing that for folks like the Conservancy. Farmland preservation was included in that, and we partnered with, for instance, the Farmland Trust and also our own Ag Preserve Board. And then affordable housing was included in it. $29 million out of $106 million, but you have to remember about 83% of the CARES Act, which was the predecessor to ARPA, 83% of that, or about $80-some million of the CARES Act funds went directly into the community. So we flipped that with ARPA because ARPA was really meant to get governments back on their feet in terms of what happened during the Great Disruption, as I call it. So combined, we're talking over $100 million between those two programs that went directly into the community. And then Alice mentioned this, the opening, but about homelessness, the opening of the low barrier shelter and continued planning for the new hub that'll be on Prince Street. So as Alice mentioned, when she came on board as commissioner, we had to re-divvy the liaison assignments, and knew I had the homelessness and housing stuff. And I said, well, it's a good time. I've been, as you all probably know, I've been involved with it for many years. And I said, now's a good time. We're going to enter the next phase, because in the contract we have with the county redevelopment authority, in that contract we had signed, and I helped to negotiate, was the fact that they needed to do a strategic plan, they needed to work on a new shelter system. And I'm happy to say that planning, which went on through 2023 and implemented in 2024, is now coming to fruition. So I thought it was a great time for Alice to come on board, because I know she really would excel at helping the folks to think about that next level of planning. And so I'm happy. It's another thing in 2025 that I'm really thankful that we're going to see some real good benefits out of that. So why out of 2022 we're now just starting to think about strategic planning? The reason for that is, and I think Alice mentioned, it's a good time. You don't do strategic planning when you're in a crisis. We knew the system was heading toward a crisis. It was harder and harder to find organizations to either host or manage shelters. Never experienced that. I've been involved with Homeless Coalition since its inception back in the early 2000s. Never since the pandemic, the great disruption, did we have an issue like we had. That was a priority. You can't, plans made of paper will not house people. They will not give them blankets and make sure that they're safe, warm, and dry. That was a priority. I'm happy to say that those things are in place now, as we mentioned, or will be in place. And now is the time to do strategic planning. So I'm really looking forward to that in 2025.
And you gave me housing and homelessness, but not land, not
the plan department. No, I didn't give you everything.
This feels like maybe a good stopping point, if I can. I want to commend you both for your efficiency in responding to all of our questions in one fell swoop. And I want to
I got more to go yet, but we'll work it in there.
I want to honor our audience today and say that, we did suggest the second half of this would be for your questions. So thank you again for your responses. I have a microphone here, and I'd love to hand this over to you all for the questions that you have for our commissioners in response to what they've shared today, or other curiosities that you may have.
Yes. Hi, I'm Aaron Sherman. Thanks for being here. Commissioner D'Agostino, so you and Commissioner Parsons caught some flack last month during a budget meeting for shutting down some questions to the budget director. And I'm curious, if you want to comment on that episode specifically, that's fine, but I'm just curious sort of generally, how do you view the role of the commissioners in promoting transparency in government? And I guess, how do you feel like, for both commissioners, how do you feel like you're stacking up against whatever responsibilities you feel?
Well, we have the responsibility to be as transparent as we can. As you know, there are certain things we can't be transparent about. But when we're talking about the budget, and specifically the incident you're talking about, I'm glad you kind of brought it up, because this is an ideal opportunity to be able to tell you what actually happens and what's going on. So questions were answered, quite frankly, by either the controller or myself or Commissioner Parsons. And so when it came time for other questions to delve deeper into other aspects of the budget, there were aspects of the budget, like, for instance, capital improvement, which have not come before us yet. They will come before us in the beginning of the year. So that's something that the staff will begin to develop. It is currently developing now. In fact, I just had a brief meeting with some of our staff, is to sort of see where they're at in that process. To have the budget director start to talk about those things in front of the commissioners, all three of us, when we're not actually in session. It was not a budget. It was not a commissioners meeting. It was an investment board meeting. The investment board has nothing to do with the budget. Investment board looks at investing the money that we have and talk about cash flow. So those questions were answered. And so when we're talking about how we actually, the implementation of things, we got to be careful about when we talk, because like I said, we want to be transparent. We also got to be careful about making sure that we do adhere to all other aspects of our responsibilities, including other aspects of the state code we have to offer, or we have to adhere ourselves to. So the budget is out there. Anybody can download it. All the numbers are there in terms of the general fund budget, the liquid fuels budget, and other aspects of the budget. The only part that is not there is the capital improvement. It should be part of, quite frankly, and I've been trying to get this to happen, and I think I know it will get there in 2025. All aspects, different funds, will be budgeted for in the coming years. With the new budget director coming on just in 6 months and having to take on the new budget immediately, and at the same time learning things, the capital improvement portion of the budget lagged behind where we want it to be. And I have no problem with saying that. I said it publicly just last week when it came up as a question from the public. So yes, we have an obligation. But when it comes to the press specifically, I want to make sure people realize this, that we do answer questions from the press. We do have some of our staff answer questions from the staff, from journalists, but there are certain journalists, quite frankly, that we know and they know that are less than, quite frankly, candid with how they actually write their stories. And that's not fair to the public. It's simply not. It's provable. It's demonstrable. We've tried to have this conversation with those folks. It doesn't work, unfortunately. So when it comes to certain folks, you come to us at a meeting where it's videotaped, and we'll be glad to answer the questions. So that's a down and dirty view of to answer your question. And if you want to delve deeper at some point, I'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, and I'll just respond to your question as it relates to the county from a transparency and particularly our department heads. I'm in favor, and I've expressed this internally as well. I know county government's slightly different than a hospital, but in my 30 years experience, typically those individuals that are close to the work that's being done and the question that somebody from the media or the community might have to be able to speak freely, I think is important. I think it's even more important when we start talking about county government and the amount of transparency that you all rely on as residents of Lancaster County. So I'm in favor, even no matter who the media is, making that happen. In some instances, particularly where I worked before, we would have our communications media director if we were concerned about the reporter and the level of questioning that may provide too much information, so from a safety or back in the hospital days, it's like HIPAA requirements with sometimes, but for the most part, people at a director level should feel pretty comfortable with it. So, I think that's real important, because I think it's also important from holding us accountable for what's, truly happening within the community too. So as you knew there from the reporting, I would have been fine with our Director of Finance answering the question and clarifying any questions, because even if there's a discussion that's being had, it may not be that clear in terms of some of that questioning.
I'll mention our Director of Communications is here, and that's his role to make sure that we have that information. But quite frankly, even with these couple of reporters we're talking about, he will attest that we say something and it doesn't quite end up that way, and that's not fair. It's not really right for you to have that.
Thank you very much for coming. We appreciate you and all the service that you do for us. I just had a question. I understand that Commissioner Parsons has announced he's running for Ryan Ahmed's seat, and I'm just curious, is he able to continue as commissioner if he's running for that, or is he not able to continue as commissioner?
Yeah, you can continue on in that role until such time that if he does become a candidate, which it's been reported on how that happens, if he becomes a candidate, then he'll, for instance, have to come off the election board, but he can still maintain his role as commissioner. And if he gets elected, if he's nominated and then elected, that's a different story. He'll have to obviously come off the board of commissioners. And your next question is what happens after that, if it happens. It's the Court of Common Pleas that will appoint a successor, and it must be a Republican, it must be the same party as the person who resigns. And that person there's no special election in that case. Under county code, that person serves until the end of that person's term they're filling in for.
Thank you.
Commissioner DiAgostino, Scott Haverstick, I appreciate the work that the election board has done in the 2024 election. I'm have not missed an election at municipal, state, or federal since 1968, and that probably pales by comparison with a lot of people in this room. But I never had a question that our county election board was anything but superb. Sometimes my candidates won, sometimes they lost. That's what happens in elections. So you don't mean to imply that prior to 2024 there were problems with elections, because again, as I say, prior to 2016 we didn't seem to have these issues, and you seem to target 2024.
There were a lot of questions around 2024. We literally had people coming up to us, either a public meeting or just out and about, concerned about the 2024 election. So, I'm not applying anything because I think we have run great elections, quite frankly, but it has become more and more complex. There is no question. I serve on the election committee at CCAP. We all talk about this. There's a reason why elections staff all across the Commonwealth, somewhere up to 50% of them after 2019, when Act 77 was put into place, left. It's because we now run 3 different types of elections. We just literally had a meeting with the CCAP is County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, where we're talking about now in-person early voting being the whole issue of getting a mail ballot and then voting right there, how that's created some really interesting logistical issues. And that's what I'm talking about, planning for that kind of thing that has been steadily increasing and being a little different since 2019. And that's what I mean about carrying off the 2024 election as well as we did, because you had to account for all of that in the biggest election we've ever carried off.
Maybe 1 or 2 more questions if we have others in the audience who want to ask.
Hi, friends. Good afternoon. I'm Christy Aron with Community Action Partnership. We're an anti-poverty organization here in Lancaster County. You both touch on homelessness and affordable housing. And Ray, I think you said $29 million about from the ARPA funding for affordable housing. Alice, oh, sorry.
No, it was part of the $29 million.
I got you. Okay. So I guess, and Alice, 5-year strategic plan, sounds fantastic and definitely needed. What can we do? We know that there are people outside right now. We know that folks are being swept from wherever they are. We know that there are not enough beds, not enough apartments, not enough housing. So what do we do now, knowing that funding is low and also knowing that we don't really have a plan? But how can we, as a community, treat folks with respect and dignity in terms of getting them with a roof over their head if that's what they want?
Yeah, that's a great question and comment. So thrilled about a shout out to Tenfold for jumping in to put the temporary shelter in the meantime, knowing that as fast as the Redevelopment Authority and partners were working on getting the Clay Street shelter up and running, we knew there was going to be at least a month of delay, and thankfully Tenfold rose to that occasion. So, it's the crisis management piece that you're talking about. So a couple of things, at least the year that I've been involved, is that we've been able to, from a county standpoint, in terms of several of our departments and using some ARPA funds to increase the outreach too that's happening within the community, the street outreach that's happening here in the city, and then also with the Redevelopment Authority working closely with Columbia in terms of, they're the next in terms of municipalities in terms of volume of homelessness, as well as up in the Denver effort area as well. So these 3 areas, the Redevelopment Authority has really focused on increasing partnerships and what can happen for folks that are unsheltered at those points, and how can we not lose the existing shelters that we have throughout the county because of staffing and all of that. but it is, pretty much almost a week-to-week Band-Aid approach to all of this because of finding the housings that's available. So the Redevelopment Authority on a regular basis is looking for opportunities of where people can be housed. But what we're finding is more success this year, even like with children and youth. We developed a program over this year with the Redevelopment Authority and Children and Youth for children that are aging out of foster care and then winding up homeless. And how do we get them housing is to really make sure that people that get more individuals that have a rental property or something that we could use to be able to use for homelessness. So we're focusing on that. What we're hearing, again, if any of you know of anybody that might be interested in this, is that people that own or can rent and are willing to do it for like a nominal cost, or we're able to find funding, but we just can't find the actual physical place for somebody to be in, is if they have some type of case manager or support person with them. So that's why the combination is only a Band-Aid. It sounds somewhat minimal, but it doesn't, because I haven't read the most recent tenfold report that they're putting out on a weekly basis, but the one that was about a week ago or so, and then I've been there a few times and asked questions related to this, is that somewhere around 80% of the folks are in the case management system in Caseworthy, the Power Lancaster system. So that means that there's a caseworker working with them to, if we identify transitional housing or some type of stable housing, we'll be able to get them into that as soon as possible. Any other ideas that people have, we're open to as much of it as possible, but it's really finding the actual house or the place that we can turn into a place where people can stay. That is not easy, and it's very expensive. As you know, those of you that were tracking the two projects we're talking about, they're not inexpensive. We're hoping with the plan, even though it's going to take a while to do that the plan, as I mentioned, is going to focus on primary prevention, which means how do we do a better job with data and working collaboratively with other areas that identify someone that's near homelessness. What are the triggers that raise a flag that say someone that's rented an apartment, if something happened during their employment, how can we intervene then, which would be a lot less expensive? And from that standpoint, and of course the best thing for people, how can we identify better touch points? And I know CAP does a lot of work in this, and certainly Tenfold does already. And we just haven't taken some of those to the scale I think that we need to. And part of the plan will be calling that out, where really how much help do we need in those areas that will be needed. The one thing I do want to mention about the plan is the reality I mentioned about resources. So we're not putting our heads in the sand and thinking this is all rosy. We know that this is gonna cost money, because we're talking about a lot of, even this past month, I've had two people contact me to say, hey, there's this warehouse and this open building that's just there. Can we just have people stay there? And for those of you that you think about zoning ordinances and all of that, which definitely these two facilities we're building that we work through, it's just not that simple. We would hope it would be, but you also just can't expect, not to have, of course, a fire system and, water and all that available. So it's complex. But I think right now those are the things that we're mainly focused on: Redevelopment Authority, and then the caseworkers, and then any place where there's housing. How can we transition that and have somebody still attached to them, so that we're working on them getting their paperwork, finding out, do they need government more support? And then employment. We need employers that are willing to employ the individuals, and then that kind of goes to transportation. So depending on where we are, this is not just a city issue. We're hoping that the plan really helps support the many municipalities there hasn't been a municipality that has said, I want nothing to know with this. Now, zoning's nothing to do with this. Zoning's another issue. I think that there's a really good handful of municipalities out in the suburban ring and in the rural areas that are interested in exploring zoning options to allow for smaller units, accessory dwelling units, and some other zoning codes that could be changed to allow for smaller places where people can actually live there, be able to afford it, and it could stay that way. So, but that's, a longer term. But this is a discussion that we're having, and it's going to take a lot of resources and creative thinking.
A subject dear to my heart is the Wrightsville Bridge. Oh, I'm Art Mann. I'm chair. Yeah. So the old bridge is in for a $250 million repair it's some serious flaws. They have, anyway, they now plan to shut it down for at least 2 years. Any accident on the remaining bridge is going to cause a lot of problems and backup. And the state's answer to that is to have at one open lane that will allow traffic to maybe creep along. But the counties, I think Lancaster County is responsible for the ambulance response because that's all in Lancaster County. Am I mistaken on that? I think I'm right. So that
Whatever municipality that would
the
be
municipality, yeah.
Right.
So it really isn't a county responsibility strictly. In that case, Columbia is going to have some way to clear those accidents quickly, or you could have traffic backing all the way up into Lancaster. So is there some way the county can maybe assist to make sure that there's a plan to get those accidents cleared up quickly?
We're working on that. It's the county MPO, which I'm the chair of, is working with PennDOT on those kind of issues. We're a little bit of ways from that taking effect. There's some issues that have to be cleared up before they can actually start construction. But those are the kind of things that we can work on at a county level to help work with municipalities and PennDOT on issues like that.
We're going to take one final question and then wrap it up.
Hey, thanks. John McCran. So my question is about the budget. And I guess, my impression from some of the coverage of the budget is that some departments, in particular, I'm thinking particularly about the library system, felt surprised at what they were not getting in the 2025 budget. And I guess my question is, do you agree with that took them by surprise? And if so, do you feel like that's appropriate, or do they deserve to have earlier discussions to be made aware that they might not be getting as much in 2025 as they got in the past?
Well, if you know anything about municipal budgeting, which we'll throw in county government as a municipal budget, that's how it works. If you've been looking at, I read all the municipal briefs that are in the newspaper, and you budget, you develop a budget and you approve it in the latter part of the year. There are cuts that have been made all over Lancaster County through municipalities, because that's when you budget. And that's when people find out through that process that they're going to, what they're going to potentially get or not get. That's how it works. We're responsible to create a budget that can work for our government entity, just like every municipality. And during that process, there are going to be some changes that are going to be affected. So you need to be aware of that. And a lot of organizations are aware that, hey, that's what's happening. And we just need to get that information and then work it into their budgets, because, that's how it works. Is it ideal? I don't know. I was a part of an organization that had the same issue, and quite frankly, I always waited and I always told my board, we're going to have to see what we're looking at getting. Now, fortunately, each of those organizations has at least made it work for this year. And but what we didn't talk about, I don't really have a lot of time today, but I'd love to be able to talk about it at some point in time, is, and I did mention this in the budget meetings that we've had, that we need to do a deeper dive in county government in terms of the services we provide, and is as efficient and effective as it can be. Are there ways we can do things that cost less, that we can collaborate more, coordinate more, and that there's a whole mess of things that we can be looking at and should be looking at, and we have been to some degree, but we need to take it to another level. And so from my perspective, there's no way, when we're sitting on the reserves that we've built up, that's much higher than our policy states we should have. Given the fact that we know we've got some work ahead of us, that we're going to be able to dig in and find out where we really can be and should be in terms of our net cost and net services that we provide, that we have built up that reserve in order to be able to use it in this circumstance. I didn't take a no tax pledge. I have no idea where this is going to lead, quite frankly. We do look at forecasting, and the forecasting is great, but that assumes that you've done nothing else to change the trajectory. And we need to change the direct trajectory, just like every business and probably family individual here has had to do over the last few years because of the economy. The damage is done. Yes, the inflation may moderate, but the damage is done. We're not going to be going back to the 2019 levels of cost. It's just not going to happen. Construction costs have doubled. Other costs have either gone up 40, 50, 60, 70%. We're not going to get those back. We need to figure out how we do things a little differently given the environment we're in, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I just like to say I'm just really surprised. I knew there were parts of, as I mentioned, I had a lot of experience with the different committees and boards in county government, but never realized that the budget in county governments were 1 year at a time. And when I realized that we weren't going to, we'd be embracing the forecasting of 2, 3, 5 year out plan, which I'm used to for several decades that I worked as an administrator in the hospital. To always just get a sense of where we're going. I'm just totally surprised. I did connect with my colleagues across the state from CCAP and others and asked what they're doing. There's a few counties that do forecasting and publicize what the budget means. Not many do. And when I asked, like, why don't you? It's always like, we've always done it that way. So surprised. It's probably one of the most things, if I had to think about what I was most surprised about in 1 year of office, is the idea that county government, and what really bothers me about that is that, I believe county government has a role to play in the community to jump in when private sector doesn't. And to what extent do we do that? We have to figure that out. So the whole idea, do we have a vision for the county? Do we have a sense of where we're going? To think about things that way as opposed to always thinking about, yes, certainly we have to be efficient. I do believe that county government, way before this past year that I came into it, is really pretty slim. The money to have the strategic plan done, it didn't come from county government. I had to look outside of county government into the private sector to find funding, to be able to get enough funding to be able to make the plan happen. So I don't see any reason why, if it's just because it's just never been done that way, that we shouldn't actually talk more about what does this budget mean to us moving forward. If that would have been done, we would have been able to at least give a heads up to some of the other areas if we thought we weren't the ones that we give we did the 17% cut on those community organizations where we do provide grants, including the library and others, that perhaps if we really was still going to do that, or if we feel that that's an important part of county government, should fund those, continue to fund those types of agencies. That's one thing. But to say that maybe in next year we're not going to be able to do that, that would be a minimal for me to think that we should give them a heads up. So I think most of you, so the reporting on that is that I didn't agree with doing that because I didn't think it was much of a heads up. I've served on many boards, just like I know I'm looking around all of you. I've served on boards with you. On some of these smaller nonprofits, 17% is a pretty big cut, and to only be given a month or two heads up is not the way to go. And I think to prevent that from happening in the future is where we need to do forecasting. And if we do forecasting, you all need to know what the budget means, because we pulled fund out of reserves, we used ARPA funds that we're not going to have again. So it's really, sort of a really significant time in the history of the county to think about how we think about things seriously. I'm not as optimistic. I think that in terms of finding more efficiencies, I think we'll find some, but I think it's going to be a drop in the bucket, because I do believe one of the things I've learned over this year is that the executive directors of the departments, that the department heads, everybody else really squeezes as much as they can get out of the money that they have. I don't know how much more we're going to be able to do that. And then I'm also concerned about, do we have enough data and information to tell us this is what we're producing and this is the outcomes of what of the things we're doing, and what's going to give if we're going to cut back even more by doing that. So on both hands, I'm going back to the data thing already, because we have to show the benefit to each of the departments and what the benefit they have to the community from an outcome for all residents that are in our county, and how do we make Lancaster County thrive as a community moving forward, and what's the county's role in all of that. So that's where I stand on it.
I want to thank you both for, sorry, did you have a quick comment?
Well, the only, I've been doing budgeting, I actually taught around the state but municipal budget. The only flying ointment to this whole idea of forecasting is when something that you can't see happens. And that happened in the latter part of this year. We had a major increase in a cost that you couldn't forecast. And so that's what created a big hole, quite frankly, that we just couldn't cover. And when you find out during the budget process, you dig in to figure out, well, how do we make it work? And you make it work by looking internal and externally.
Thank you both for your responses and your time. I want to give a round of applause for our commissioners for being here and for you all for showing up. Thank you. Very briefly, I just want to share the video from this session today will be available sometime next week. Please feel free to share it with others who you know might be interested in learning about this. Our next First Friday Forum will be on Friday, February 7th. We'll be hearing from the Lancaster County Waste Management Authority. And to receive invitations to our First Friday events, please become an Hourglass member on our website. And I want to thank you all. Have a great weekend and Happy New Year.
Yeah.